What if a single offhand joke at the dinner table unraveled your entire life? I thought I knew my wife, my best friend, and my family, until one moment of laughter turned into the darkest revelation I'd ever face. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy pouring my heart out on the internet, but here I am. There's a lesson buried in what I'm about to share, and maybe, just maybe, it'll help someone avoid making the same mistakes I did. This isn't some made-up drama to grab your attention. It's my life, raw and real. It's messy, painful, and as far from perfect as you can imagine. But if opening up keeps even one person from being as blind and naive as I was, then it's worth it. Let me start with a proper introduction, though. Hi, I'm the guy whose life got flipped upside down by what seemed like an innocent joke. Yeah, you heard that right, a joke. That offhand comment was the first crack that revealed the truth. My wife, the woman I vowed to spend my life with, had been betraying me behind my back. Before I dive into that mess, let me give you the backstory so you can understand just how blind I was to what was happening around me. I'm in my early 40s now. My hair's still mostly brown, though the grays have started to creep in, thanks for that, life. I'm not a fitness junkie, but I take care of myself. I've got a steady job as a project manager at a mid-size company. It pays well, not enough to live lavishly, but enough that we've never had to stress about bills. For the longest time, I thought I was doing okay. I worked hard, provided for my family, and kept things running smoothly. But man, I had no idea what was bubbling beneath the surface. And then there's Emma. We met about 13 years ago, and the first time I saw her, I was blown away. She's tall, blonde, and has these sharp, striking features that command attention. Emma is the kind of woman who makes heads turn when she walks into a room. Back then, I felt like the luckiest guy alive just being with her. Trust me, I had no idea what was coming. I wasn't immune to her charm. I fell hard, fast, and deep. I thought I'd hit the jackpot with Emma. She had this magnetic energy, always chasing after something bigger and better in life. At first, I admired that about her. It felt like she pushed me to aim higher, like we were partners building something together. But as the years went by, it became painfully clear that bigger and better didn't include us. It was all about her, more attention, more compliments, more possessions. Expensive possessions, at that. Emma loved designer bags, the latest phones, and shiny new jewelry. I did my best to get her what I could, but I was always struggling to keep up with her appetite for more. The truth is, it was never enough. For the first few years of our marriage, Emma didn't work. She stayed home with our son while I worked long hours to keep the lights on and a roof over our heads. I didn't mind at first, it felt like we were a team. But when our son started school, she got a job at a high-end gym as a personal trainer. It seemed harmless, even a good thing. I was relieved she had something to focus on besides spending money or complaining about how little time I spent with her. Now, let me talk about our son. He's 8 years old, and let me tell you, that kid is my whole world. He's got this fiery red hair that stands out wherever he goes. It's one of those details that makes him uniquely him. The thing is, neither Emma nor I have red hair. I'm brunette, and Emma's blonde. Of course, I understand how genetics work, recessive traits and all that, but his hair color had become a running joke between us over the years. I'd crack light-hearted jokes about him being the neighbor's kid. Maybe the mailman's got some explaining to do, I'd say with a laugh, and Emma would usually roll her eyes or chuckle along. It was all in good fun, at least, I thought it was. But then there was this one dinner. I made the usual joke, trying to keep the mood light. Maybe I should have a chat with the neighbor about our little redhead, I said, grinning as I half-laughed. That's when everything started unraveling. I shoveled food into my mouth, barely paying attention. It was supposed to be one of those tired, harmless jokes, the kind you've said so many times it barely lands anymore. But this time, Emma's reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. Instead, she froze. It was only for a second, but I caught it, a flicker of something. Her smile faltered, just for a moment, before she forced it back into place. It was so quick that if I hadn't been looking right at her, I might have missed it. I don't know why, but that look stuck with me. It felt like I had hit a nerve, though I couldn't figure out how or why. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself it was nothing. But over the next few days, I started noticing little things, tiny details I wouldn't have thought twice about if I wasn't already uneasy. For one, her phone. Emma had always been casual with it, leaving it on the counter or tossing it on the couch. But suddenly, it was glued to her side, always in her hand, her pocket, or flipped face down on the table. Anytime it buzzed, she'd grab it like it was about to explode. I told myself I was overthinking it. Work had been grinding me down lately, long hours, late nights, early mornings. I wasn't home as much as I wanted to be, and I thought maybe the distance between us was just a result of my job. I convinced myself I was imagining things. Then there were the girls' nights. Emma had always been social, going out with her circle of friends every now and then. That wasn't new. But they were happening more frequently now, and she'd come home later and later, sometimes more drunk than what felt normal for a casual night out. I'd ask her how the night went, and she'd brush it off, tossing out a vague answer like, just the usual, maybe mentioning a name or two I didn't recognize. I didn't press her. At the time, I thought I was being a good husband by not prying. But now, I wish I had asked more questions. Why would I question her? Emma was an adult, and I trusted her, or at least I thought I did. But here's the thing about trust, once there's even the slightest crack, you can't stop yourself from questioning everything. It's like a switch flips, and suddenly you're a detective in your own mind, analyzing every little detail. I'd lie in bed at night, replaying that look on her face when I made the joke about our son's red hair. Was there something more to it? Was she hiding something, or was I just being a jealous, insecure husband? You're probably wondering about my friends, Tom, Bob, and Rick. We've been tight since college, and they've always been there for me. Every few weeks, we'd carve out some time to escape the grind. Fishing, hiking, or renting a cabin in the middle of nowhere, it was our way of decompressing, doing something manly, and forgetting about the world for a while. Those trips were a lifeline for me, a chance to clear my head and recharge. Emma hated them. Every time I packed my bag, she'd give me this look, like I was walking out on her and our family. "Off with your buddies again," she'd ask, her voice dripping with resentment. What about me? What about your family? And maybe she had a point. Maybe it was selfish to want those escapes. But I felt like I needed them. Between the demands of work and home, those trips were the only thing keeping me from completely losing my mind. It's not like I was gone every weekend. Once or twice a month, tops. I thought it was harmless. But while I was off with the guys, thinking I was blowing off steam, Emma was back home, doing what? At the time, I had no idea. I figured she was just relaxing or spending time with friends. It never even crossed my mind that she might not be sitting around waiting for me. Looking back, it's so obvious. But then, I was blind. I've always had a twisted sense of humor, the kind that's gotten me into hot water more than once. It's also helped me defuse some pretty tense moments. But I never expected it to be the spark that would unravel my entire marriage. That joke at the dinner table, the one that made Emma freeze for just a second, turned out to be the catalyst for everything that came next. I started getting this nagging itch in the back of my mind, like a splinter I just couldn't shake. I wasn't sure if I was being paranoid or if there was actually something to worry about, but the thoughts wouldn't leave me alone. Suddenly, I found myself thinking more about relationships, infidelity, and all the ways things could go wrong. These weren't thoughts that used to bother me, not until now. One night, after a long day at work, I was scrolling through YouTube, trying to relax. That's when I stumbled across this random video. Some guy was pranking his wife by pretending to confess he'd cheated on her. The whole thing was staged. He casually dropped the fake confession while secretly recording her reaction. As you might expect, she lost it. Screaming, throwing things, full-on meltdown. By the end, though, they were both laughing it off, saying it was all a joke. It was dumb, really, but for some reason, I couldn't stop watching. The idea stuck with me, nagging at the edges of my brain. And that's where my own brand of stupid comes into play. I started thinking, what if I did something like that with Emma? Emma's always had a jealous streak, not about my friends, but about this imaginary harem of women she seems to think I'm secretly meeting up with during my trips with Tom, Bob, and Rick. Every time I'd get back from one of those weekends, it was the same routine. She'd throw accusations my way. Where did you really go? Who were you really with? She'd ask, her tone sharp and suspicious. It was exhausting, honestly. I'd try to reassure her, over and over, telling her it was just the guys. Just hiking, fishing, or hanging out in some cabin. But no matter what I said, it felt like she never fully believed me. The irony is, I'd never given her a reason to doubt me. I've never been the cheating type. Yet, in her mind, every time I wasn't glued to her side, I was somehow betraying her trust. And now, here I was, wondering if I should turn the tables, just for fun, right? It wasn't that I wanted to hurt her or make her upset. I guess part of me thought it might prove a point. But looking back, I realize how stupid it was to even consider it. Little did I know, my dumb idea would lead to something I wasn't ready to face. In her mind, every time I was away, I was off climbing into bed with some random woman. So, in my slightly twisted, booze-fueled logic, I thought, why not prank her like the guy in that video? Let her feel what it's like when the shoe's on the other foot. I had no clue what I was setting in motion. One night, after knocking back a few drinks at the bar with Tom and Bob, I came home feeling buzzed but not out of control. Emma was already in her usual mood, tossing passive-aggressive comments my way about how I was probably out with other women again. Normally, I'd ignore her or argue back, but that night I decided to go for it. With the alcohol warming my blood and that stupid YouTube video still playing in my head, I thought I'd pull off the perfect fake confession. Quietly, I set my phone up on the counter, making sure it was positioned just right to catch everything. I turned to her, putting on my most serious face, the kind of face you wear when you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. "Emma," I said, letting my voice drop, "we need to talk." She stopped mid-sentence, the sarcasm freezing on her lips. "What is it?" she asked, narrowing her eyes, clearly suspicious but not yet alarmed. I took a deep breath, as if steeling myself, and let the fake confession spill out. "I've been seeing someone else." Her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't yell, didn't throw anything, didn't even look shocked. Instead, she just stared at me, her face unreadable. I started to second-guess myself, wondering if I'd pushed the joke too far. But before I could say anything else, she crossed her arms and, with a voice as calm as still water, said, "Well, I've been cheating on you too." At first, I laughed. I mean, come on, this had to be her playing along, right? Trying to one-up me in the middle of a prank. So, I smirked and threw back a sarcastic reply. "Oh yeah? With who? Tom? Bob?" I chuckled, shaking my head, waiting for her to roll her eyes and call me an idiot. But she didn't. Her expression didn't change. She just stood there, arms folded, looking me dead in the eye. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "With both of them." The room started spinning. My laugh died in my throat. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, for her to crack a smile and tell me I was an idiot for falling for it. But no. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't messing with me. This wasn't a prank. This was real. I'd been trying to mess with her, waiting for the punchline, but it never came. What followed is mostly a blur, shouting, accusations, and a whirlwind of words I'll probably never fully piece together. What I do remember, though, is stumbling out of the house at some point, sitting on the cold doorstep with my head in my hands, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed. Because it had. That stupid prank, the little game I thought would be funny, had blown up in my face. Emma's betrayal cut deep, no doubt about it. But Tom? That was a whole different kind of pain. He wasn't just some random guy I hung out with, he was my best friend, someone I'd known for over a decade, since college. Tom had been there for some of the biggest moments of my life, my wedding, the birth of my son, the times I thought life was solid. I trusted him completely. And now? Now I knew he'd been sleeping with my wife behind my back. The more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it felt like a complete dismantling of my life. I couldn't just let it go. I'm not the kind of guy to sit back and let people stomp all over me without consequences. That's not who I am. I reached out to Bob. He'd always been the calm, steady one in our group. If anyone could help me process this mess, it was him. When I told him everything, he didn't sugarcoat it or try to talk me down. Instead, he looked me in the eye and asked, "What do you want to do?" That's when the plan started to take shape. Tom had a lot to lose, way more than just my friendship. He had a good job, a wife, and 2 kids. That's right. He was living the picture-perfect family life, all smiles and stability on the surface, while he was having fun with his wife behind the scenes. The hypocrisy of it made me sick. If he thought he could get away with this without repercussions, he had another thing coming. I wasn't just going to end our friendship, I was going to destroy his world. He betrayed me in a way that cut deeper than I thought possible, and I was done playing nice. I wanted him to feel the kind of pain he'd caused me. Seeing all the evidence in black and white, the texts, the photos, felt like pouring salt on an open wound. But it also stoked the fire inside me, giving me the drive to do what needed to be done. It wasn't just about exposing the affair. That would be too simple. No, I wanted to hit Tom where it hurt the most, his reputation, his family, the life he'd so carefully built. That's when Rick came into the picture. Rick knew Tom's wife, Katie, fairly well. They'd gotten to know each other at various gatherings over the years, and she was a good person, kind, grounded. She didn't deserve to be left in the dark about the kind of man she was married to. Rick and I hatched a plan. The first step was telling Katie the truth, but it had to be done delicately. I couldn't just storm in and blow everything up right then and there. No, we needed her on board. At the next gathering, after a few drinks, Rick and I managed to pull Katie aside for a private conversation. We kept it subtle, not wanting to cause a scene in front of everyone. I could see the confusion in her eyes as we asked to speak with her, but she didn't question it too much and followed us. Once we were out of earshot, I pulled out my phone and showed her everything, the texts, the photos, the evidence that proved Tom had been unfaithful. At first, she didn't believe it. She stared at the screen, her face a mixture of disbelief and anger. I could almost see her brain working overtime, trying to make sense of what she was looking at. "It's not true," she muttered at first, as if trying to convince herself. But as the realization sank in, her shoulders slumped. The truth was undeniable. Katie didn't cry or scream, she was stronger than I had expected. She just stood there, staring at the ground, her hands trembling slightly. It felt like forever before she finally spoke. "What do we do now?" That was my moment. I told her the rest of the plan. We weren't just going to confront Tom, that would have been too easy, too clean. No, we were going to make him feel cornered, trapped, like his entire life was crumbling around him. Katie agreed without hesitation. I could see the fire in her eyes, the determination to take back control of her life. The trap was set for the following weekend at another gathering. Everything was carefully planned. We waited until the perfect moment, when Tom was relaxed, confident, thinking everything was normal. Then, Katie dropped the bomb. She walked into the room, her voice steady but icy cold as she said, "Jack showed me everything." Tom froze. His face turned pale, his mouth hung open, and for a moment, it was like he couldn't process the words. Then he looked at me. The panic in his eyes was unmistakable. He knew. In that instant, the reality hit him, his entire life was crashing down around him, and there was no way out. That look on his face. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. That look in Tom's eyes, the betrayal, the panic, was everything I had been waiting for. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt a sliver of satisfaction. It wasn't much, but it was enough to dull the ache, if only for a moment. I didn't need to say much. The damage was already done. The weight of the truth and the shattered trust in that room spoke louder than any words I could have added. But the fire inside me wasn't extinguished, it had only grown. Tom's betrayal had opened the floodgates, and I wasn't stopping there. Next in line was Bob. If there was one thing I knew about Bob, it was that he cared about his money above all else. His bank account was his pride and joy, and that's exactly where I planned to hit him. This wasn't just personal, it was about justice, or, at least, my twisted version of it. After what had happened with Tom, I wasted no time turning my focus to Bob. But this time, I knew I couldn't confront him head-on. That wouldn't work. Bob wasn't like Tom, he was calculated, guarded, and a direct approach wouldn't cut as deep. No, with Bob, I needed something smarter, something that would hit him where it hurt the most without him even seeing it coming. That's when I got Rick involved again. He'd already proven to be a crucial ally when it came to Tom, but this time, I needed more than just his moral support. I needed his tech skills. Over a few beers one night, I laid out the plan, and Rick didn't hesitate for a second. He was all in. We started with the basics, digging through Bob's public profiles, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the usual places. It wasn't hard to piece together a picture of his interests and habits. Bob liked to brag, and his online presence was practically a treasure map. It didn't take long to figure out where he was investing his money and what kinds of ventures excited him. Armed with this information, Rick and I got to work. The idea was simple but devastating. With Rick's expertise, we created a fake investment opportunity. We set up a sleek, professional-looking website for a fictional tech startup that promised big returns for early investors. It was exactly the kind of flashy, high-potential opportunity that would grab Bob's attention. We didn't cut corners, either. The site was packed with fake testimonials, links to dummy profiles on financial forums, and enough buzzwords to make it look like the next big thing. It even had exclusive invites to build the illusion of scarcity. Everything about it screamed legitimacy. Then came the bait. I casually mentioned the opportunity to Bob during a hangout, acting as though I'd stumbled across it myself and was considering investing. I made sure to sound just hesitant enough to spark his interest without making it seem like I was pushing him. Bob couldn't resist. He was already asking questions before I'd finished explaining. The trap was set. Bob took the bait like a fish on a hook. He couldn't help himself. He kept pressing me for details, wanting to know more about this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That's when I handed him the fake website, acting like I was being generous by sharing something I'd stumbled across. "Check it out for yourself," I said casually, knowing full well that his curiosity would take care of the rest. Sure enough, it didn't take long. A week later, Bob was in. He threw a sizable chunk of cash into the fake startup, enough to make a noticeable dent in his portfolio if things went south, but not enough to ruin him. Not yet, anyway. The genius of the plan was that once Bob was hooked, he did most of the damage on his own. He started hyping up the opportunity to others, pushing the investment like it was his golden ticket. Then, just like that, the whole thing vanished. The site went dark, the startup disappeared, and every trace of the business was wiped clean. The fallout was immediate. Bob was furious, scrambling to figure out what had happened. He started making calls, contacting everyone he knew, trying to pull strings and get answers. He even contacted lawyers, but the beauty of the plan was that there was no trail to follow. Rick had made sure of that. Every detail had been scrubbed clean. The more Bob dug, the more he realized the truth: he'd been duped. And the best part? He couldn't tell anyone. Admitting he'd been scammed would mean admitting he wasn't as smart as he thought he was. It would shatter the image he had of himself as the savvy investor, the guy who always had his finger on the pulse. For someone like Bob, the humiliation was worse than the financial hit. And he never knew it was me. Rick and I didn't talk about it much after everything was said and done. We didn't need to. We knew we'd done what needed to be done. I had my revenge on both Tom and Bob, and for a while, that sense of satisfaction was enough. Seeing them both pay for their betrayals felt like justice in the moment. But deep down, I knew there was still unfinished business. Emma. You'd think that after what happened with Tom and Bob, the divorce process with Emma would have been straightforward. But it wasn't. It was messier, uglier, and far more draining than I ever anticipated. Despite everything, she managed to come out swinging, demanding an obscene amount of alimony, more than I ever expected, especially given the circumstances. Even with the satisfaction of revenge in my back pocket, dealing with her was a battle I wasn't sure I was ready for. Emma's demands during the divorce were beyond unreasonable. She had a job now, yet she wasn't just asking for alimony, she wanted child support, too. And not the standard amount. No, she was asking for a figure that could fund a luxurious lifestyle, the kind of money that would let her live comfortably for years without lifting a finger. It was outrageous, but for a while, I was resigned to it. What choice did I have? I'd been raising that boy as my son for 8 years. I loved him more than anything, even after everything that had happened. But deep down, something gnawed at me. I asked for a DNA test, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. It was my last resort, a desperate move to protect myself. I hated myself for even questioning it. I felt like I was betraying the boy I had loved and raised, but after everything Emma had done, I couldn't just take her word for it. Not anymore. When the results came in a week later, I was sitting in my car. I didn't even make it out of the parking lot before opening the envelope. And there it was, staring me in the face. He wasn't mine. The boy I had poured my heart and soul into raising wasn't my biological son. That moment felt like the final betrayal, the one that cut deeper than all the others combined. It was like the ground beneath me had completely fallen away. I sat there, numb, clutching the paper that confirmed the truth I had dreaded. My lawyer was ready, though. He'd seen this kind of thing before, and he knew exactly what to do. Once the DNA test results were in, Emma's case fell apart. Without proof that the boy was mine, her claim for child support had no legal standing. She tried to fight it, of course. She threw every excuse she could think of at the judge. She argued that I was still his father, that I'd raised him, that biology didn't matter. And in some ways, she was right. Emotionally, I was his father. But legally, she couldn't force me to pay for a child that wasn't mine. In the end, the judge sided with me. I walked away from the courtroom feeling victorious, but it was a hollow kind of victory. I'd lost so much, my wife, my best friend, and the little boy I had thought was my son. The boy I still loved, even if he wasn't mine. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I needed to rebuild my life from the ground up. New place. New job. New routines. I had to put as much distance as I could, both physically and emotionally, between myself and the life I used to have. The memories stayed with me, though. Emma, the betrayals, and the boy who wasn't mine, they followed me like shadows, impossible to outrun. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been following my story. Whether you commented, sent me a message, or just silently read along, your support has meant more to me than I could have imagined. It's strange, turning to strangers on the internet for comfort and advice, but there's something powerful about knowing that others are listening, that you're not completely alone in your pain. When you're in the middle of your darkest moments, just having someone acknowledge your struggle can feel like a lifeline. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. When I started sharing my story, I honestly didn't know what I wanted to achieve. Maybe I just needed to let it out, to purge all the anger, pain, and confusion that had built up inside me. But as the comments and messages started coming in, I realized something: my story wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who's been through betrayal, heartbreak, or loss, and come out the other side. It's about resilience, about refusing to let the worst moments of your life define you. I know there are many of you out there who are still in the thick of it. Maybe you're living through your own version of betrayal, trying to figure out how to move forward. Maybe you're lying awake at night, replaying everything in your mind, wondering what went wrong or why the people you trusted hurt you so deeply. If that's where you are right now, I want you to know this: it doesn't stay this way forever. It feels like it will, I know. But one day, you'll wake up, and the pain won't feel as heavy. One day, you'll find yourself smiling again, not because you've forgotten, but because you've chosen to keep going, to rebuild, to reclaim your life. I'm not going to lie to you and say it's easy. It's not. Healing takes time, and sometimes it feels like it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. There are days when the past sneaks up on me, when I hear a song or see a picture, and it all comes flooding back. But those moments don't control me anymore. They're just part of my story, not the whole of it. Starting over has been the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also been the most rewarding. I've built a life that's mine again, a life where I don't have to constantly question what's real and what's a lie. I've learned to let go of the bitterness, not for their sake, but for mine. Carrying anger is like holding a burning coal, it only hurts you in the end. And as much as it hurts to admit it, life is too short to waste it on the people who broke you. To those of you still fighting your battles, I want you to remember one thing: you're stronger than you think. Every day you wake up and face the world, you're proving it. Even on the days when it feels like you're barely holding on, you're still moving forward. That strength will carry you through, even when it doesn't feel like it. And one day, you'll look back on this chapter of your life and realize it didn't break you, it shaped you. So, here's my final message to all of you: don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on the idea that happiness and peace are possible, no matter how far away they feel right now. Keep fighting for the life you deserve, 1 step at a time. It's not about erasing the past, it's about building a future that makes you proud. I don't know what's ahead for me, but I do know this: I'm not the same man I was when this all started. I've grown. I've learned. And I've found strength in places I didn't know it existed. To anyone out there reading this, I hope you find that same strength. You deserve to heal. You deserve to move forward. And you deserve to be happy. Thank you for being part of my journey. Take care of yourselves, and never stop believing that brighter days are ahead.